All right. So last week, we ended at the 30th consideration, which was looking to see if the moon had already transited the 29th degree. Let's go back for Anne Louise's sake. We started at 19, and we'll just kind of do a little bit of a review, and then we'll move on from there. So we'll just kind of quickly move through each one. So the 19th consideration, of course, was if the moon is void of course, which we've already talked about, right? When we were looking at the fourth consideration, that was one of the things that was important in the fourth consideration was Kyle Asai or something like that, which was when the moon is void of course, or a planet, but specifically the moon. And I was mentioning that I thought that, void of course really is talking about the moon more than any planet. So notice though what it says about what void of course means, because then she signifies impediment, and the matter the question was about, or which is begun, or which is being handled, will not come to a good end, and the matter will be annulled, right? So annulled meaning brought to nothing, and it will not come to be, nor be completed for the one wishing to do it, and that the querent will return from it empty-handed and likewise disgraced and impeded. So void of course was really considered a major impediment, especially if we're thinking about for a horary question, right? And I remember getting into an argument with this woman on Reddit who had put an election that had a void of course moon. And I said, hey, you know what, you can't use this election. You can't use this election. I mean, it's not going to work. She was asking for ways to kind of, what were things she could do to kind of work around it or tweak it. And I was like, there's no tweaking. This is a shit election. Nothing is going to come of this. And she was like, oh yeah, well, okay. Well, every time, I mean, she just was really pissy about it. And I was like, okay, well, go ahead, try and do it. I mean, I'd love to know what happened and I'd love to be wrong. But, this is why I basically said to her, you don't want to work with this election. It was because of what we're reading right now. So the 20th consideration is that you look to see if the moon or a significator is joined to one of the planets. So we looked at that one so we looked at this last time, because then it signifies that it is what is going to be, or that it is going to be. So what they're basically saying is there might be another planet that either the Lord of the Ascendant or the moon might come to, which isn't the significator itself, but which might help the situation to get taken care of. So like a translation of light would do that. And as a matter of fact, there's a chart that I worked with just a little while ago where that happened. And it was a translation of light that I thought might not have worked, but it actually did work. And so basically what it was this woman had asked a question about getting a job. She got the job. She was basically bringing an old horary chart. She got the job, but then she wanted to know kind of how the job was going to go and whether or not the job would work out. Okay, I'm looking for the chart as I'm doing all this as I'm talking now, and then I'm going to show it to you. Okay, so here's the chart. Great. So she did this chart a while ago, right? She did this chart a while ago when, and it looks like, as you can see here, the moon has left the opposition to Saturn. Saturn is the ruler of the 10th. Is that big enough, or do you want me to make it bigger?
Just slightly bigger.
That's big enough?
Yes. Okay, that's okay. Yeah. Just
better.
Zoom out a little.
Okay. So the Saturn represents the job.
Okay.
And the moon, so the ruler of the ascendant, which is Mars, has already separated from it, right? So Mars is at 17, Saturn is at 8. So there's already a separation, meaning that it should already maybe not have happened, or it's already behind her or whatever, right? However, the moon is bringing up the rear. And now here's an example of what we were talking. Here's an example of that other thing Bonatti talked about, and I had a different chart to show you. Do you remember when Bonatti was talking about translation of light and how the moon can't take what she isn't given? And so his idea, he was talking about, what was it, Emilio, the tyrant Emilio Ragazzi or something like that, and how he insisted that the moon always translates every planet to every other planet, right? Translation of light. However, and he said that he thought Saul said that, but Bonatti said that's not what Saul meant. What Saul meant was that, right, especially for the moon, and see, he didn't say it for any other planet. It seems like any other planet can transmit, but since any other planet can translate. But since the moon is the main transmitter, his belief, Bonatti's belief, was that she can only transmit what is given to her, which means if she is with a planet, if she is in some kind of relationship to a planet and there is no reception, then she has received nothing to give. That's his belief. Okay, so once again, if the moon is with the planet and if she's conjoining a planet, in other words, applying to a planet or separating from a planet, and there is no reception in that aspect, then the moon has received nothing, so there's nothing for her to give to another planet. What Bonatti believed was that the moon had to be in an aspect with some kind of reception, so that either means that the moon would be pushing nature to the planet, or that she would be pushing power to the planet, or in this particular case, the planet themselves is in their own sign. So what we have here is the planet has given the disposition to the moon, because even though he hates getting the Leo from the moon, he will still give her him. He will still give the moon his disposition. And so, and if you remember, the second part of it was that the moon won't translate to just any other planet. She just won't go to the next planet. She will only translate to a planet who is either in her dignity or in its own dignity. And well, he said in its own dignity. I added the her dignity part. So because, right, she can only give, so she can't give what she hasn't been given, or what she hasn't been rendered, which is what he basically said. So in this particular chart, if we were looking at that rather restrictive idea of translation of light for the moon, then we have it, or we have a version of it. Because the belief from what I've read before is that planets that are in their own signs can receive, right? Receive anybody, right? If a planet is in its own sign, it receives whoever it comes into contact with. That's the largesse of being in its own sign. So that this Saturn can commit its disposition to the moon, who thus carries it, and then Mars himself is also in his own sign, even though he's in the fall of the moon. So the moon can carry that disposition and give it to Mars. So this was something where I thought, oh, maybe the person didn't get the job, right? Because ultimately this is a form of besiegement, right? The moon is moving from the opposition to Saturn to the square of Mars. But both of these planets, the ruler of the ascendant and the ruler, the significator for what the person is asking for or asking about, are so strong. If they were in square, they'd be pushing power at each other. Right? We like it when planets are in their own signs and aspecting each other. So this is a place where I might have gotten it wrong. Right? I might have looked at the square to the moon and the fact that the Mars was in her fall and thought, that's not good for her. But it's only because I would have maybe overemphasized the role of the moon. Right? Because the moon's not the main significator for the person. It's the main significator for the question, but not for the person. The person is right here, and they're highly qualified. They're in a very good position to get the job. The job is a good one. There could be a relationship between the two planets, right? It's like I said, it's separating. If it had been, shall we say, if it had been applying, maybe I would have thought that, that's not so bad. That's not such a bad thing, right? Mars is in his own sign. Saturn is in his own sign. They can come together. It's a work relationship, which the square kind of tends to represent. I guess that makes sense. But I got kind of caught off with what was going on with the moon. And what happened was there was a major delay before they offered her the job. So there's the Saturn opposition.
Oh, yeah.
So she got the job, but there was a delay. So I just thought I would bring that to the attention. And because that's an example, that's more than one example, but that's an example of some of the things that we've been talking about. All right, so 20th consideration is that you look to see them, all right, if the moon is, or the significator is joined to one of the planets, that's the reason I brought it up. So that was the main reason I brought that other one up, was because, right, these are the two significators. The moon is aspecting the main significator for themselves. Now, he might have been saying, hey, if for instance, look at how the next application of Mars is to Jupiter. So that might have been something I would have missed too. Right? It's kind of, it's wide, but 4 and 4.5, that's 8.5 degrees. It's within that. So this Mars is applying to this Jupiter. So technically, we do have the condition. Look to see if the moon or a significator, which Mars is joined to one of the planets, which Mars is, because then it signifies that it is going to be. Whence you must consider whether he to whom the moon is or the significator of the matter or question. So he's made all of those things, he's detailed it all out. You must consider whether he to whom the moon or the significator of the matter or the question is joined, receives the significator or the moon. For then it signifies the full completion and perfection of the matter. Now, the Jupiter in that other, the Jupiter here does not receive the moon, but remember, the Mars is pushing power. So there is reception because the Mars is pushing power at the Jupiter. So this is actually something of an example of number 20. Because one of our significators is aspecting a separate planet, even from, I mean, it's interesting. He was talking about the matter or question, which would have been this, but we can even, I mean, even the fact that they're together in the same sign is something, right? But the main thing is, oh, well, wait a minute. If we wanted to use the significator of the matter asked, we can. This Mercury-Sun conjunction is applying to the sextile of the Saturn. So the Sun is the 5th house, and notice how the moon is in the 5th house as well. So maybe this, I mean, so 5th house, I think of enjoyment. I don't think this had anything to do with children, even though Mercury represents children, right? Represents young people. So I don't think that this job had anything to do with kids, but maybe it had to do with something she enjoyed. There might have been, yeah, it might have been the type of job that she really liked. We know that the job is a good one, a decent one, right? Because the Saturn's in Aquarius, it's in its own sign. We know that she's good. Well, we know that she is apt for the job, or she is qualified, or she is in a good position to do the job because she herself is in the sign, its own sign. Then we have these other two planets. So the Sun, and oh, look, it's the 5th and the 6th. And what's the other? Gemini, the 3rd. So the 5th, the 6th, and the 3rd. So there's some kind of, so that's kind of my point. this is an example of what number 20 is, but we don't know if, I don't necessarily myself know if it really matters. I think more this trine or this square to Jupiter is a little bit more indicative because she got the job, right? Jupiter says yes, Saturn says no. Right? So Jupiter says yes. So I think if anything, if we're looking at it, even though these are closer, right? This is only 5 degrees. So even though, so I mean, I don't really understand exactly where he's talking about or why that would necessarily come into being. Or, I mean, what I would look at obviously would be description instead. But this Mars Jupiter, I think, does maybe fit the description a little bit. And maybe we might find a chart where that description or where this number 20 is shown to be even more apt. Now, what we will notice is that we'll find quite a bit. Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Lily.
Okay, I was wondering that Venus is in the exaltation of Mars, and it's applying a sextile to Mars as well, and it rules
But
the
remember,
second
Venus
house.
is not going to get to him. Right? Matter of fact, this is an example of what we call refrenation.
Oh,
Refrenation is when, I think, yeah, because we talked about prohibition already. If I'm not mistaken, I'm going to look it up here while I talk. Refrenation is when a planet is applying, and before it can perfect, it goes retrograde. And that's what's happening with that Venus. She
oh,
never
it's
got, yeah, she never gets to Mars. She never gets to Mars. And matter of fact, that even came up in the, what was it called? Oh, in the horary Reddit thing, where he actually did a whole, is it blocking? No, that's prohibition.
okay.
Wait a second. Yeah, so that Venus isn't going to get to him. she's going to go instead. She's going to go revoking. Here we go. Revoking or refrenation. Okay, so it is. So refrenatio is also a term. So revoking or contradictio is another term. So it's inticat. Inticat is the Arab term. So revoking is whenever with planets prepared for application, the one of them is not available for the application because it is made retrograde. So restraint is if a planet would be joined to another, it's applying, but before it comes to it, the first one, the faster one will go retrograde and its conjunction will be annulled. So that's actually, so we've got a lot of nice, interesting things going on in this chart that show us. So we've got a translation of light. We've got a refrenation with the Venus Mars. So yes, it should. So yes, so if anything though, to be honest with you, yes, you're correct. Yes, you're correct. It would certainly, remember, what do we say whenever a planet is receiving aspect from benefics? It helps it, right? It benefits the planet. So I think that definitely, even though there's not going to be a perfection, just the fact that her influence is coming by sextile, you're absolutely right. It is helpful. So the fact that the person in this chart, so I think we can look at it through the lens of number 20 if we're not looking at the significator for the question, right? Or the right, we're looking at it for the signification of the querent, not the quesitive, right? Not the questioned about, but the person questioning. In number 20, it looks like Bonatti is really mostly referring to the quesitive, what's being questioned and what's being questioned about. But we can use consideration number 20 in this one if we do use the querent instead, because sextile to the minor benefic, including, as you said, with reception, and then squared to the major benefic, who's in the same sign as this as the quesited. So that even in and of itself is something. So I think, so these are all things that if maybe I had just been spitballing, I would have missed. And I would have said, I don't think you're going to get this job.
Yeah, because Mars is in the fall of Venus, and Venus is in the exaltation of Mars. So that's
Right.
really an
So
interesting dynamic going on.
and the thing is, we're really,
Yeah,
we wonder, we really only care what's happening to Mars,
exactly. Yeah.
right? We only care what's happening to Mars. We don't care what's happening to Venus. We care what's happening to Mars. Mars is receiving a sextile from a benefic in his from his exaltation.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Mars is applying to the square of a benefic who's in the same sign as the planet that represents the quesited, that represents the matter.
Yeah.
So I would have made a boo-boo if I had relied on my own, if I had been thought I was too cool for school. And the funniest thing was I was in a conversation with Kid Cubby, who's one of the moderators, and we were talking, and I was going to go on this long diatribe about why I thought that the person wasn't going to get the job. And then I reread the top and saw that she had gotten the job. And I was like, oh shit, what did I miss? You know, and also Kid Cubby was talking about, you know, the fact that once again, oh, here's the other thing. We're going to get to this too, I think in a second when we get, is that, remember how we've talked about that planets in their own sign, malefic planets in their own sign, don't act that malefically. So Kid Cubby believed that we're not talking about malefic planets here. These planets aren't acting malefically. These planets aren't acting as malefics, is what he was saying. So even though there's an opposition, we're not looking at Saturn as a malefic. He's naturally malefic, but we're not looking at him as a malefic. So, but going on, we can come back to this question. This is a fascinating chart for these. Okay, let's go back to Bonatti now. Oops, wrong Bonatti. Where the hell? Okay. Okay, so that was 20. And so reception is a good thing. So remember, we even had that extremely close sextile, applying sextile from Venus, even though it's not going to happen, still the influence is there, and there's a major reception happening there. So with the reception, see, so looking to see what the moon or the significator of the matter or question, right, which we decided we weren't going to do, is joined, receives the significator or the moon, which the Venus does, for then it signifies the full completion and perfection of the matter, which happened. And it's good and praiseworthy end, which happened. I say this if the receiver were a benefic. If, however, it did not receive, and the moon or the Lord or significator of the matter were to commit its disposition to it, nevertheless, however, the matter will be perfected. That's what's happening in the chart we just saw, right? The Lord of the significator, the significator is committing his disposition to Venus, right? Venus isn't receiving Mars. Mars is receiving her and committing his disposition to her, right? So, or we could say that the significator is doing the receiving, right? So he's basically saying if the planet receives the other planet, if planet C receives planet A. But in this one, he's saying now if planet A receives planet C. If, however, it did not receive, so Venus doesn't receive Mars, right? Because Mars is in her detriment. Venus doesn't receive Mars. So ultimately, that particular aspect of the condition or the consideration isn't happening. But what he says after, he says, hey, but if the significator commits his disposition to the other, to the benefic, then it can happen anyway. And that's what's happening, right? She's pushing nature onto him, which makes him receive her and push his disposition onto her. Now, I might have that wrong. At some point, I need to talk to Ben Dykes. I need to talk to somebody who works with him or something. I need to talk to somebody who knows, or at least who knows the texts more than I do about this, or who's worked with this, because I think that I'm right, but I want to know that I'm right. Let's put it that way. I feel like I'm okay. Because this idea of the difference between committing, because we saw it last week, committing disposition versus receiving. Can a planet, right? And remember that only applying planets can push. So that means then, does that mean only an applying planet can commit its disposition? That's what's confusing me and making me wonder, right? Because ultimately, Venus is pushing nature, which means she's pushing her nature and his nature, Mars's nature as exaltation ruler of Capricorn, onto Mars. But if we look at it the other way, in order for her to also receive him, he would have needed to be here in Pisces, right? Or there in Taurus. So this sextile would have been the most efficacious for Venus, not just Mars. So you see what I'm saying? You see where I'm going kind of with this? This, whatever is going on between Venus and Mars, helps Mars. And Mars, so I'm going to assume, or for now, I'm just going to bookmark my belief that a planet receives, Mars is receiving Venus. Oh, shit, this issue of committing disposition, it is getting me. It is really getting me. Maybe I'm not going to, so I'm just, yeah, it's really getting me. I'm not, because ultimately, if a planet is pushing, it's committing their disposition, is how I feel. But he's making a very specific, I don't want to get caught in the weeds with this, I'm sorry. So, but anyway, so we're just going to go for right now. For right now, we're just going to go with my definition, and I'm going to seek out a resource to figure this shit out. So I'm going to say that obviously Mars is receiving Venus, right? She's in his exaltation, so he is receiving her. But Venus is not receiving Mars, right? Because he's in her detriment. However, Mars is committing his disposition to her because she's in his exaltation. Yes? Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay. So my question will be, so my bookmarked question is, can only an applying planet commit their disposition? So in other words, is Bonatti saying that Mars needed to be in Taurus and Venus in Capricorn, or Pisces and Venus in Capricorn, in which case Venus would be receiving Mars, right? So then the benefic would be receiving Mars, right? Or would it mean Mars would need to be, and secondly, Mars would also be pushing nature at her, or pushing power at her. No, pushing nature at her. She'd be pushing nature at him. Matter of fact, this would be mutual reception by exaltation. Right? So that means that he would also be he would be committing his disposition to her.
Yeah.
I'm confused about that. Okay,
Yeah,
we're gonna move.
but there's just so many things that's working in this chart. Like Jupiter is in its house of joy, Sun is also in its house of joy, and that Sun Mercury is applying a sextile to Saturn, who has essential dignity. So I think there's just like many factors. But the point that you raised about Venus, that I think that we need to really dive into that.
We need to figure it out, and we need another resource. We need someone who knows what we do. because it's not the first time, because remember we saw it last week and it confused me then. So
yeah.
But this is really an important thing then. If it does not receive the moon or the Lord or significator of the matter, were to commit its disposition to it. So from where I'm looking, it looks like that's what's happening. Okay, but we need to figure out if that's happening or not. But if it were a malefic, even if the moon or the significator commits disposition to it, and reception did not intervene, it will not be perfected, and evil and detriment will be introduced into their sides. So that's interesting. So basically it's saying if you've got a significator that's aspecting a benefic, it should be good for the matter. If it's aspecting a malefic, it should be bad for the matter, ultimately. And then reception or commitment of disposition shows whether it's going to happen or not. Unless it's a malefic, in which perfection does not help it, right? Right? If, however, it were to receive, nor were it otherwise impeded, it signifies the perfection of the matter, even if with labor and obstacles and weariness. So that's not true. So if there is reception with the malefic, it will just perfect, but not happily. Okay, 21st consideration. We had to take quite a deep dive into that one, huh? Okay, is that you should see from which of the planets the moon is being separated, because it signifies that it already was and is past. And for if she is being separated from a benefic, it signifies good, which already was. Okay, so that makes sense. If she is being separated from malefic, it signifies evil, which already was. So you can generally assume that if the moon is, whatever the moon is separating, especially in a horary chart, shows you what the person is leaving behind, shows what's behind them, right? Because that's what they're disregarding. Remember, the term that we use for separation is planets are in disregard. So we are in disregard to each other, and I'm moving on to the next thing. Okay, 22 is that you consider to whom the moon is conjoined, meaning in an applying aspect, because it signifies that it is present. So if you wish to judge something about a present matter, it is necessary for you to consider to whom the moon is now joined, degree by degree, or by less than 1 degree, and you ought to judge good or evil according to the one to whom she is joined. Okay. So whoever she's conjoined signifies what's present. So moon applying to something represents the present thing at hand. 23rd is to look at the moon to see to whom she is then joined, however, so that her conjunction is not yet completed, because it signifies what is going to be. So we've gotten 3 things. We've got separation, which is behind you. We've gotten conjunction, which is it's happening right now, or we're conjoining, so basically a partile aspect. And then we have an aspect that's applying but not yet exact. So that's 21, 22, and 23. So if it's not yet exact, it's about to happen. If it's exact, it's happening now. 24th consideration is look to see if a planetary significator were in its own dissension, because then it signifies the impediment of whatever matter belonged to the significator, and distress and sorrow because of it. Dissension meaning fall or detriment. And if the question were about a prison, which someone feared, it signifies his falling into it. So whereas we would expect yes from a planet in its own sign, when it's a negative question, we expect yes from a planet in its detriment. Am I going to go to jail? So if we see, am I going to go to jail, and Venus is in Libra in the 1st house, we say, no, we don't think so. But if we ask, am I going to go to jail, and Venus is in Scorpio in the 2nd or in Virgo in the 12th, then yeah, maybe that is going to happen. Obviously, if she's in Virgo in the 12th, definitely. Right? Or even, I guess it might be saying, if Venus is aspecting the ruler of the 12th, which is Mercury, and Mercury is in Pisces. Well, it can't be in Pisces because she's in Libra. Mercury is in, I don't know, Mercury is in Capricorn. Right? So it's, not in a decent, not really in a good sign, or it's in Sagittarius. There we go. Right? Which is the detriment. So that might also imply that indeed that's going to happen, right? 12th house representing jails. And if the question were about a prison which someone feared, it signifies his falling into it, and likewise disgrace and detriment. And if it were about an incarcerated person, it signifies his long stay in prison and a legal fiction in it. Now, remember, we couldn't figure out what that really meant more than the incarcerated person believes. Or maybe that the incarcerated person doesn't believe they're as guilty as the legal sentence. Maybe that's what that's trying to imply. The 25th consideration is that you consider whether the planetary significator of some matter is retrograde, or this was really useful last week, wasn't it, Leila? Retrograde or stationary in its first station. Because then it signifies evil and impediment and discord and diversity and contradiction and a repetition in evil and disobedience and turning back to evil from whatever the reversion was and in a bad direction. This is the belief about, this is the medieval belief about retrogradation. And we were talking last week about how it was the first time that I really saw an extensive description of what they believed retrogradation does to a planet. Right? So let's just kind of go through it one by one again, like we did last week. Obviously, evil and impediment and discord. But this is where I think we really get into the nuts and bolts. Diversity and contradiction. Diversity, because if you're not single-minded about certain things, they won't happen. Right? If you're mentally diffuse or unfocused, that's diversity. And often if you're mentally diffuse, you're in self-contradictory, right? So if you're in self-contradiction mode, which I certainly know, and probably Layla does with all of our mutable things and with our chart rulers and Mercury signs and dual signs, I get extremely diverse and contradictory. And we both have retrograde Jupiters. I get hyper contradictory and can't move forward. That's a thing. And this diversity and contradiction and a repetition in evil. So I went out today with my friends and, I haven't been going out much. I've been staying at home, for this pandemic, et cetera. And I can't really handle being out with people that much. I have to kind of get back into it, and I know I need to. But there is me repeating back into my reclusiveness instead, disobedient, knowing that I need. Oh, here's another great example. I know I need to make these short videos, but I'm being self-disobedient and turning back to the evil and being slothful. Right. So this is kind of the thing. It's whatever doesn't move you forward moves you backwards, right? Going backward, right? Have you ever known somebody that you were kind of good friends with, and you see them after a while? It could be 6 months, no less than 6 months. You see them after a while, and they're still in the exact same place they were the last time you saw them in every way, mentally doing exactly the same thing, and you yourself have moved on. That's how retrogradation, that's the difference between moving forward and not. What were you going to say, Layla? You unmuted.
Yeah, like I personally experienced this entire shebang throughout the last decade. Like I was moving forward, then I was going back, and then forward, and then going back. So yeah, and I do experience the same things with a lot of friends of mine, like to the point where it has become a pattern for them, like going back to the same thing that they should like really run away from.
I mean, depending on the culture, it can be harder to do, right? I mean, right. I mean, certainly like a culture like India and Pakistan, much more prescribed what people can do and what's acceptable, and what's conventional acceptable. And so, one of the things that that I definitely have learned, especially from spending so much time in India, is that this American and European, but really even more American idea of independence and individuation is really our invention.
Hmm.
It's not how the rest of the world really operates. And it's
Exactly.
really, it's not like not living with your parents and, moving out from your parents at 18 and all that kind of stuff that we kind of pride ourselves on in the United States. That's not how the rest of the world really works. I mean, I'm in a country that is contiguous with the United States, and that's not what's happening.
Right.
So that, I mean, Mexico is very much like India, and people live at home and don't move out. They may move out when they get married. They don't move into their in-laws' houses, kind of like you see in Pakistan and India, but they tend to stay at home for a much longer period. Families stay much closer, no matter whether they're happy families or not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Right. So no matter whether they're happy or not, that's who they've got, and that's who they stick with. And so it's a very different kind of thing. All right. So that was okay. And notice what he says about the first station. So we talked about the difference between the first and the second station. So remember, when a planet is about to go retrograde, it goes through this period where it gets slower and slower and slower until it stops altogether and then goes retrograde. That period is called, people I think are calling it the shadow period, but that period is called its station. And so the first station of the planet is when it's about to go retrograde. The second station is when it's about to go direct again. So what the 25th consideration is saying is your first station and your retrogradation are the most malefic. In its station, it does not signify as much evil as in retrogradation, because retrogradation signifies a present evil. So you're presently moving backwards when you're retrograde, right? So it's at hand. And a past one, which is still virtually present. So you're moving backwards to this past. Hey, Layla, would you say that was kind of what's happening? Like there was some kind of like a lodestone. There was kind of a lodestone point, and you kept moving backwards towards that because you said you were moving forwards and backwards. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah. The last decade was exactly like that. It's not anymore, but the last decade was. Yeah.
Interesting. So once again, it's just
like
giving us more.
like keep
Okay,
trying to
good.
do I was keep trying to do something that I knew would not be like fruitful at the end, and I was not even into that thing, but I was doing it just because I had this notion that I can make it work. But that doesn't
Ah,
not. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. You're
You
definitely
need to let go after a certain point. You just need to
you're the
realize that there's certain
yeah
things
you
that you cannot do. Yeah.
yeah you're definitely the kind that doesn't like to take no for an answer. So yeah, I would no, I could see how you'd bang at it until you cracked your head open, um,
Exactly.
right? Um,
Thank God for that.
yeah. So and thankfully that decade taught you about it,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? um, Okay, so once again, so we're getting all these tidbits. So if anything, this 25th consideration is once again teaching us about the medieval view or understanding of retrogradation. Evil, impediment, and discord, diversity, contradiction, repetition in evil, disobedience, and turning back to evil from whatever the reversion was, and in a bad direction. All of the stuff that Layla just mentioned. In the station, and also because retrogradation signifies a present evil and a past one which is still virtually present, and a future one which is already as though in the process of becoming. That's deep. So it represents a present evil, a past one which is still virtually present, which we could see in the case with Layla, and a future one which is already. So what we could see, okay, so that decade, we see that the past evil that was virtually present is what kept pushing her backwards, right? Because the regradation signifies the present evil. The present evil was moving back to this virtually present past evil. And the future evil was the fact that she was going to continue to revert back to it. Make sense?
Yeah.
right? So that the future, so on some level, I mean, I'm once again, I'm spitballing and interpreting, but I'm trying, because I'm trying to keep it within the context of what retrogradation has to mean. And so what I think this, because look at this, he's basically saying this evil is happening in the past, present, and future. It's present, it's past, but virtually present, and then it's going to happen in the future. Or it can be three different ones, right? So because retrogradation signifies a present evil, so the present evil is that we move backwards. The past evil is the thing that we move backwards to. So this is me just believing, just kind of spitballing this. And the future evil is the knowing that we are going to go backwards to that past evil again. Or the future evil is the bad result of the past evil that we keep going back to. Ah, perfect. Okay, perfect example. Now, this is an extreme example. A battered wife who can't leave her husband.
Yeah.
Or no, let's not go battered. Let's not even go battered. Let's just say a woman who's in a fucked up relationship, or a person in a fucked up relationship. The relationship is terrible. It's my parents. Let's say my parents, perfect example. So my parents were in a fucked up relationship for 32 years. My father had to die to escape it, right? Terrible relationship. But neither of them ever made any chance. I mean, except when I was like maybe 7. After that, neither of them made any kind of conscious effort to make themselves happier and do something different and get out of the relationship. Neither of them. And so what did they have? They had this shitty relationship where nobody was happy. So the present evil was that neither of them could let this relationship go, right? Like you couldn't let that thing go. You had to make it happen. The past evil is the fact that this relationship ain't working, right? And that we just stick with what isn't working. And the future evil is the fruit of this negative relationship, which just gives more and more unhappiness and misery. So we can look at retrogradation in that way, so that once again, there is no moving forward. There's only moving in a loop. Would you say that was what was happening, Layla? You were just in this kind of circular loop.
Absolutely. It was this whole loop just because I could not like not take no for an answer, but more like I could not let go and, think that maybe I was not cut for it. I was just not ready to accept that I was not ready cut for something that I wanted to do.
And
Right.
that was
Yeah.
the present evil. And that was the
Yeah.
present evil.
Yeah. It was the present evil. So once I
That
took
was
no for
the,
an
so
answer,
right,
I
and the
started to
present evil, that, and so
yeah,
that thing looming that you insisted on make work was the past
exactly.
evil that was virtually present. And then your consistent disappointment and going back to it was the future evil, which was
Yeah.
already as though in the process of becoming.
Yeah. Once I took no for an answer, it was just like so much more peaceful.
Bam, then you moved forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then you moved away. All right. So if anything, we just got a really, really good idea of how the medieval astrologers saw retrogradation and how we should be considering it ourselves, right? Because like I said last week, when it was just Layla and myself, was, often people ask, what does retrogradation mean? And the modern astrologers have a very good shtick around it. They really do. They've figured out a really good language around retrogradation that I've never felt that I could. I don't want to necessarily top it, but I had never really felt that I could equal, because I didn't really feel like I had all of the pieces of it. But this gives me all the pieces, but it's extremely negative. And so now we know why cadency, combustion, and retrogradation are considered the 3 major impediments for any planet. So something to think about. So the 26th consideration is that you see whether a planetary significator is in its 2nd station, because then it signifies impediment and evil which is already past, so which already was and is past. So we talked about last week about they used to use sickness as a metaphor for stations. So when the person was in its first sickness, it's when a person takes to their bed feeling bad. And then the retrogradation itself was when they were feeling, was the illness. And when they started to feel good and be able to get up from their bed, that was the second station. And when they finally came to full health, that was when things went direct. And so once again, however, certain people said that the second station signifies what direct motion does, but that it is to be understood according to a certain manner of speaking, just as it is to be said about someone who was sick and he is already getting better, that he is already freed and healthy. But that is not true, pure and simple, even if it is near the truth. So he's making the distinction between the station and the direct motion. For just as the first station does not signify as much evil as retrogradation does, so the second station does not signify as much good as direct motion does. 27th consideration is that you see whether the malefic planets are significators of some matter or of some work. Now, this was really interesting because this kind of applies to the chart that we just looked at. And I think I had another one too, but one of the things, this really, I think maybe this consideration the most has affected me this week when I've been looking at charts. So to see if a malefic planet is a significator of some matter or of some work, or of some beginning, or of some nativity, or of one of the things which happen every day or which pass through the hands of men, because if they were to signify evil, they will signify evil, they will signify it more greatly. And if they were to signify good, they will signify it to be diminished and incomplete and with sorrow and distress and difficulty and oppression, so that he whose business it was will hardly believe that it will be perfected for him, unless perhaps the malefics themselves are of a very good condition and well disposed. So I thought about, we talked about this with respect to the fifth house. Because think about it, if you're asking, am I going to be pregnant? And Saturn or Mars are the ruler of the fifth, or are the main significators for the fifth house, then even if Mars is in Scorpio and Saturn is in, Aquarius or Capricorn, they still hold on to their natures, right? So we know that Mars and Saturn are going to act less malefically when they're in their own signs, but we also know that their natures, Mars is a hot and dry planet, Saturn is a cold and dry planet, right? Saturn he is the slowest planet of the seven. He represents slowness. He represents delays and slowness. So no matter if he's really strong, he can still string you out. That's the thing I see a lot, especially when I see on Reddit people asking about, am I just going to be alone? And they're in their mid-20s and Saturn is in Aquarius ruling the seventh house. It's like, oh no, you just haven't ripened to where it's going to happen. It might happen at 40, it might happen at 50, it might happen at blah, blah, blah. But it's not going to happen in youth like most people are used to. So he can produce, but Saturn is father time. He'll do it on his own time. So he can make it happen. He can say yes, yes. He can say, I usually say no, but to you, I'm going to say yes. But you're just going to have to be patient and wait. Same thing with Mars. Mars might say, yeah, you're going to have it, but it's not going to be any fun. Your mother-in-law is going to be a complete bitch about it. You're going to be arguing with your husband the whole time. It's going to be one struggle after another, but it's going to happen. I promise. Right, so those planets can make things happen, but I gotta be me, they still have to be themselves. So when I was talking to Kid Cubby, and Kid Cubby was saying, I don't really deal with this idea of natural malefics or natural benefics. And I got where he was coming from, but I have to say that I disagree. How I feel. I feel like any planet can become functionally malefic or benefic. But what I also feel is that I gotta be me. Each planet is who they are. Right? If Venus is ruling the fifth house, that's going to feel different than if Mars is ruling the fifth house. Yes?
100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I mean, if Jupiter is ruling the fifth house, it's gonna feel different than if Saturn is ruling the fifth house. It's gonna feel different. Now, if Jupiter is in Capricorn in detriment and combust, it might feel like Saturn, won't it?
True. Yeah.
So that's my point. So here's my point. It's like, so then if Jupiter is in Capricorn and he's combust and he's in detriment and he's retrograde, he can't act like himself. He can't expand. He can't give you the expansion. He can't multiply for you. He can't enlarge things. He can't make things bigger. We were talking about this last week with our charts. Or I was talking about specifically with mine, with learning that I can't actually be too Jupiterian because my Jupiter doesn't work. He doesn't work. He doesn't work as Jupiter. He works as a really expansive Mercury. But it's taken me until I'm going to be 56 in a month. It's taken me to almost my fucking 56th birthday to figure that out. Right? So that's why when people are like, how long is it supposed to take to learn astrology? Well, bitch, I'm 56. I've been studying it for 30 years and I just figured out this aspect of my chart.
Yeah,
what the fuck are you expecting?
Honestly,
what the fuck?
It would take me the same amount of time if I hadn't met you.
Well, believe me, there'll be other secrets that we won't unearth. I mean, but hopefully you got me for at least another 30 years, right? So.
Oh yeah, sure. Two
So.
Jupiters. One who
Well,
went to imparting
right.
education of the other.
Right, all of us, all three of us. We're a team now. We're a quorum. We're a cell. We're a cell now. So yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so that was a very interesting thing. So now we've gotten a really good idea of what the first and second stations mean, what retrogradation means. I love it. Okay, 27 is that you see whether the malefic planets are significators of some matter or some work. We were just looking at that. Oh, right. And the evil that they represent, once again, the difference between having a benefic. Oh, here was another one that we saw that was, and as I've said, I haven't really been looking at this in charts. To see if the planetary significator of some matter were slow in course, for then it prolongs the affecting of the quesited matter. Basically, it acts like Saturn and delays the matter. And if it were the beginning of some building, it will be prolonged and its completion will be delayed so that it will hardly or never be perfected. And if it were a promise made to someone, what was promised will be delayed and will hardly be perfected. So I just thought all of this was interesting. Or most slowly, or for one of the, so if your dad says, I'm going to buy you that new iPhone, and it happens during the slow, while the planet is slow, you don't get that iPhone when you thought you were going to get it. And then this was even interesting. They even delay matters if the significators were in Sagittarius, in Capricorn, in Aquarius, and in Pisces, whether or not their lords were slow. I didn't understand this fully last week. I do now. What they're actually saying is, if a planet is slow, or if a planet is in Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, or Pisces, because then it's in the sign of slow planets. Isn't that something? Whether or not their lords were slow. They even delay matters if the significators were in Sagittarius and Capricorn, in Aquarius and in Pisces, whether or not their lords were slow. But if they were slow, they postpone more. So the significators don't even have to be slow if they're in these signs. I think. Hold on a second. I just want to, because what he's saying here, oh shit. What he's saying here is, excuse me. Okay, to see if the planet in some matter were slow in course. Okay, so that's the main thing. And if threats were made, blah, blah, blah. They even delay matters. Now, what is they? They even delay matters. Okay, so yes, I am correct. They even delay matters if the significators were in Sagittarius, in Capricorn, Aquarius, and in Pisces. Okay, so the significator does not need to be slow of course. The significator can just be in those signs, whether or not their lords, namely Jupiter and Saturn, were slow. But if they were slow, but if Jupiter and Saturn were slow, okay, so what he's saying is if the significator were slow of course, or if the significator were in Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, or Pisces, whether or not Jupiter and Saturn are slow. And if Jupiter or Saturn are slow and the significator is in one of those four signs, it'll postpone it even more. So it'll postpone if the planet is slow of course. It'll postpone if the planet is in one of those four signs. It will postpone more if the planet is in one of those four signs and Jupiter and Saturn are slow of course. That's what I think it's saying. Sound right?
Could be, yeah.
Right? See if the planetary significators of some matter were slow in course. They even delay matters if the significators were in Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. Whether or not their lords were slow, right? So it sounds like it's a completely different consideration. Yeah?
Yeah, it does sound like that.
It sounds like it's separate. Planet can be slow, it can be in those four signs, and the rulers can either be slow or not slow. Because look here, if indeed they were in Aries or Scorpio, they postpone less. That's Mars. Remember, we were looking at this.
Yeah.
Leo less, we're going Chaldean order. Taurus and Libra less. Gemini and Virgo, they hasten more. So again, so it looks like he's basically saying there are two ways a matter can happen quickly or slowly. It can be in the signs of planets who are fast or slow, or it itself can be fast or slow. And if the planet is slow, if the okay. So one, planet A can be slow. Two, planet A can be in the four signs by the two slowest planets. And their rulers, Jupiter and Saturn, can either be slow or not slow. If they are not slow, it still postpones. But if they are slow, Jupiter and Saturn, the rulers of Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces, then it slows it down even more. If the significator is in Aries and Scorpio, it postpones not quite as much. If it's in Leo, not as much. The Venus signs, not as much. The Mercury signs, it will happen pretty quickly. Cancer, it will happen relatively quickly, is what I'm assuming. So obviously there are two different ones. A planet can be slow in course. A planet can be in a sign that is ruled by a planet that is slow. And whether a matter will come to be, how quickly a matter will come to be, can be postponed by slowness, of course, of that planet, or that planet being in a sign of a planet that is a slow planet, or a planet is in a sign of a planet who is slow, of course. Questions? Interesting stuff. 29, almost to where we stopped, is that you pay attention to whether the moon is joined corporally or by aspect to one of the planets, and her conjunction was complete minute by minute, because then it signifies that it is present concerning the matter. And when she has transited that minute, you must see to which of the planets she is joined, because he will signify that which ought to come of the matter. Okay, so in the horary subreddit, somebody wrote a question about a test that they were going to take. And they wanted to know whether or not they were going to be able to make it. They were going to pass this test. They had screwed it up 3 times. They had messed it up 3 times. And so she wanted to know whether or not she was actually going to get the job, or not the job. She messed it up. She wanted to know whether or not she was going to pass this test. And so let's see if I can. Oh, where is it? I was hoping I could find it. Here we go.
What that test was.
What's that?
I low-key want to know what that test was that she failed 3 times.
It was something I forget, because I didn't ask her what it was, but I remember asking if there was some kind of financial aspect to it, and there was.
Oh my God, was it? Could it be the CFA?
I think it was actually.
Yeah, because that's very difficult, and if it's finance involved, then it's definitely CFA.
I think it was the CFA. Okay, so so you can see the chart here. Hold on a second. Let me see if I get it bigger. Okay, there we go. All right, so now let me just go back to the sheet 1 second so we can read this, because what happened was, the thing I'm always noticing is, because I'm essentially self-taught. You know, I mean, I worked with Rob Zoller through his correspondence course, but I never like worked closely with him. But I'm pretty much completely self-taught in astrology, and especially in horary. And so I always have a tendency to come to horary from left field. Most of these people who are working with people, they come from very specific traditions, John Frawley or whatever other. But so I almost always, Kid Cubby is one of those people. He's working with somebody who worked with John Frawley. But I'm always coming from a different place. We usually come to the same answer, but we come from different versions. So he wrote something coming from a different version. And then I basically used this consideration. And so whether the moon is joined corporally or by aspect to one of the planets, and her conjunction was complete minute by minute. So because then it signifies that it is present, and when she is transited that minute, you must see to which of the planets she is joined, because he will signify that which ought to come of the matter. So what I inferred from this, because he said, so what is this, just another significator? And I said, what I actually think Bonatti is saying from this is that matter takes precedent. You will even look at the planet from which the moon were then separated before she was joined to him, to whom it was said right away, minute by minute, because he signifies that which has already been concerning the matter. Now, in this particular chart, it's not to the minute.
Okay.
But here we have the moon at 024, and we've got Mercury. This is a question about a test. We have Mercury at 052 or 005, right? So we've got 19 minutes passed. So what I thought was, and also look at how Mercury is the ruler of the 12th. So the things that I said to her were this. What I think is happening, what I think the chart is saying that is that this is what's at hand. Mercury is the rational mind and the intellect. Mercury is also the ruler of the 12th house, which represents what we do in isolation. One of the things that we do in isolation is study. And here we have Gemini on the 12th, on the cusp of the 12th. So what I told her was, I said, your study habits are at hand right now. And then I said, you know, it looks like, also look at how Mercury is in Sagittarius, and it's with, oh, it's with the South Node. So I said 3 things. I said, there's probably a sense of disillusionment around this subject matter and this test, you know, because K2 doesn't really want to do new karma. And so probably every time that you do this, you experience some kind of disappointment or disillusionment, or even anemia, like you lack, like you lack energy around it. And then also the fact that Mercury is in Sagittarius means that they haven't been paying attention to the details.
Oh,
Right,
this
so
is definitely
Sagittarius,
significant,
right?
yeah.
It's the big picture, right? So
Yeah.
Mercury's in detriment. So he hasn't been. This person hasn't been doing Mercury, and then the fact that there was this Mercury Sun, I said, you know what? It looks like there may have been an inflation, right? Because the combustion tends to create self-inflation. There may have been an inflation believing that you knew it too well, or that you understood it too well. And she said that the last time she took the test, that was what was happening, and she failed it. So she said pretty much everything I said was correct. That there has been a belief that she understands it better than she does. That she does understand the larger themes, but not the details. And that she hadn't fully done the important study.
Yeah.
So I took that to mean that this was at hand, not the answer to the question, because the Jupiter was the ruler of the ninth would be the test itself, but what was at hand was this. Yeah. And the money. And then I asked her, do you have to pay for the CFA?
Yeah, a lot.
Yes, that's what she said, that it was quite a bit of money. She said it was quite a bit of money for the test. And so that because I said, is there a financial aspect to this? And she said, every time I take the test, I have to spend quite a bit of money.
Yeah, it's definitely that.
Okay. And I said, is it around finance? And she said, yes. So it must be the CFA. I'm pretty sure it was CFA. So yes.
Did she post this chart a few days ago, like in November, after 20th November?
Let's see. Yeah, she did. It was, let's see, I have it right in front of me.
24 November. Yeah, exactly. It's the CFA exam because it was this cycle. She would
yes, it was. Yes, it was. Right. It was 24th November.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was 24th November. So that's a great example of what we're talking of that particular one. So he didn't, he was coming from his view, which was, so wait, what does that mean? What, the Mercury is another significator? And I took it to mean, hey, wait, stop. This is what we are dealing with. Don't the question, fuck the question. Bam, this is what's right in front of you right now. And of course it was germane to the question. Right? How she was using her mind and her isolation, her time alone, was what was fucking shit up. So I just thought I'd bring that one to your consideration as well, as an example of this number 29 and how I decided to use the 29th consideration when I was looking at that chart. 30th consideration, this is where we stopped. Look to see when a planetary significator or the moon has already transited the 29th degree of the sign in which it is. This was really useful information too, and has touched its 30th degree, especially if it has transited 1 minute of the same degree. So in other words, if it's at 29 degrees in 1 minute or later. Because then there will be no strength for it in that sign. But there will be in the following one. So I think that's a good blanket one to think about. If you remember from number 6, when we talked about, or number 5, when we talked about the ways that the moon can be impeded, it said anytime the moon was in the last degrees of any sign, because they were the terms of the malefics. But now we're getting even more specific. We're saying that if the moon or any significator, or any planet, is in the 30th degree, that it no longer has any strength in that sign, but it will have strength in the next one. So that gives another reason, in my opinion, to go ahead and use the really, really close out of sign aspects, right? If something's at 29 and something else is at 0 or 1, that it makes sense to go ahead and use that. Whence, if it had first signified something bad, it would not have harmed the one which it seemed it ought to harm. So if it's in the 30th degree, like if some house threatened to fall, it would not wound the one who had left it and had already put one foot on the threshold of the door, and had the other advancing beyond the threshold itself, quickly leaving, and then the house fell down. So that's what the 30th degree does. If it's promising evil, it spares you by a hair's breadth from the evil. And if it had signified some good for someone, it would not profit him unless it is like someone who has thrown a snare toward some bird and touched the feathers of its tail, but did not catch it. Right? So, ooh, just out of my grasp. When Saul said, if a planet or the moon were in the 29th degree of some sign, that its strength exists thus far in the sign in which it is, because he did not yet transit the 29th degree entirely. So that's 2801 to 2900. And in the degree which is before it and which is after it. Okay, so just some more interesting information. 31. Okay, so now we're moving on. One planet seeks, I looked at this one and I had to kind of figure it out. When one planet seeks the conjunction of another, that's applying aspect. If it were next to the end of the sign in which he himself or whose conjunction he seeks is, that second planet leaves from the sign before the conjunction is perfected, and see if he is joined to it in the following sign to which he is changed. So basically they're saying if Venus is at 28 and Mars is at 29, and then before Venus can get to 29, Mars is at 30. Before Mars can get to him, Mars goes into 0 degrees of the next sign. So then see if he is joined to it in the following sign to which he is changed. Then the purpose is perfected if the planet gives him something in the sign in which it is joined to him, unless he or it to whom he wishes to be joined is first joined to another. So basically he's saying if Venus is in, let's say Venus and Mars are in Pisces, Mars moves into Aries and Venus moves into Aries. And we're talking about love, right? So we're talking about love. And, or even if we were talking about that one chart we were looking at where Mars would leave. So we're talking about love. And sure enough, Mars leaves Pisces. Venus gets to 30 degrees of Pisces, and then Venus moves into Aries and conjuncts him or conjoins him by bodily conjunction. Bam, that's seeming to say that the purpose would be perfected, even though Venus would be detrimented. Because the other planet, Mars, is giving him something in the sign in which it is joined. Same thing would maybe happen if both Venus and Mars were in Aries, maybe even more so. If Venus and Mars are in Aries and Mars moves into Taurus, and then Venus moves into Taurus and perfects when they're there, that's probably an even better example. Unless he or it to whom he wishes to be joined is first joined to another planet. Because then the purpose is annulled and is not perfected. This is another form of, I don't think this is called this is another form of something kind of like reformation and prohibition. It actually might be another form of prohibition. I forget what they call this, but this is another thing that tends to be in the horary textbooks of an aspect formation. So once again, two planets are coming to a conjunction in the same sign. Although it's not necessarily in the same sign, I'm just using, right? I'm just using that. Seeks the conjunction of another. It doesn't have to be in the same sign. He doesn't say the bodily conjunction. It can be any aspect. So they're applying. So Mars moves. We're using the conjunction, the bodily conjunction as an example. Mars moves out of Aries and goes into Taurus. Venus moves into Taurus. But when Mars moves to Taurus, Jupiter is there at 1 degree, or Jupiter is there at 0 degrees 40. Mars moves into Taurus, bam, Mars and Jupiter perfect, which means that the Mars-Venus thing won't happen. So that's the second part of that. The first part is Mars moves into Taurus, Venus follows him, they perfect while they're both in Taurus. And that's great for her. The second one is Mars goes to Taurus, Jupiter just happens to be right at the beginning of Taurus. Mars perfects with Jupiter, leaving Venus out of the loop. Okay, so that's number 31. Even see if it is again joined to the other to whom he first. Okay, so basically what they're saying is you might be able to get it on the way back or or go through. See if he is joined to it in the following sign to which he is changed and the purpose is perfected if the planet gives him something in the sign in which it is joined to him. This is if reception intervene. Unless he or it to whom he wishes to be joined is first joined to another, because then the purpose is annulled and is not perfected. Even see if it is again joined to the other to whom he first wanted to be joined after he was separated from the one to whom he was joined when he was changed from the said sign, since the other imposed itself before the first conjunction could be perfected. Nor should you forget this, because a corporal conjunction will prohibit an aspect and cuts it off, but an aspect will neither prohibit nor cut off a corporal conjunction. Do you see why I had to go back over this?
Yeah.
I had to go back over this. So the whole first part makes perfect sense. Like I said, 2 planets, but now we know he's not just talking about bodily conjunction. We know he's talking about any aspect. So let's start at the end. A corporal conjunction will prohibit an aspect and cut it off. But an aspect will neither prohibit nor cut off a corporal conjunction. So that means that in the example that I just used, Venus to Mars, Mars goes into Taurus, and Jupiter is there. That prohibits. So it is another form of prohibition. That is a prohibition. We're just going to call it that for now until I figure out exactly what they use. And it might actually be, like I said, that might be the other form of prohibition. So prohibition, in this particular instance, we're using this term. When Mars comes to the aspect of Jupiter, Venus, he has cut that off. Ain't going to happen. However, if Mars were in, we're moving into Taurus, right? If Mars were in Pisces, Mars were in Aquarius moving into Pisces, okay? So Venus is at 29 degrees of Aries. Mars is at 30 degrees of Pisces, of Aquarius. Jupiter is at 1 degree of Taurus. Before Venus can get to the sextile of Mars, Mars changes signs, goes into Pisces, and sextiles the Jupiter. Venus will then, which means that the Venus aspect, the Venus conjunction to Jupiter will not be, I needed to do 3. Damn it, God damn it. Okay, so that means that when Venus conjuncts Jupiter, she won't be prohibited. But we were trying to use Mars as the example. So that means that Jupiter has to be in Aquarius. Got it? So Jupiter is at, no, Jupiter has to be in Pisces. Jupiter has to be at 0 degrees of Pisces. Venus is at 29 degrees. Venus is at 29 degrees of Aries. Mars is at 30 degrees of Aries. That's in order for this to show the right example. Venus at 29, Mars at 30 Aries, Jupiter at 0 Pisces. Mars moves into Pisces and sextiles the Jupiter, but that does not prohibit the Venus from perfecting to the Mars, as per this last sentence. Because a corporal conjunction will prohibit an aspect, but it cuts off and cut it off. But an aspect will neither prohibit nor cut off a corporal conjunction. Now, if we go backwards, now we understand. Even see if it is again joined to the other to whom he first wanted to be joined. Now we know why he said that. After he was separated, because he might still be able to do it. He might still be able to perfect. There might just be something that happens in the midway, and then they still perfect. So an example of what wouldn't perfect is if, okay, so we want Venus and Mars to perfect, right? We want Venus and Mars to perfect, and we know that a corporal conjunction can prohibit an aspect. So we're going to put Venus in Pisces. Venus is at, or in Aquarius. Venus is at 29 Aquarius. Mars is at 30 degrees of Aries. Jupiter is at 0 degrees of Taurus. Okay. Mars goes into Taurus and conjuncts Jupiter, which prohibits Venus from being able to make her sextile to Mars. Got it? This is something we're going to have to revisit. I can feel it from both of you. Basically, what he's saying is, if a planet changes sign, they still might be able to perfect the matter. If a planet changes sign and conjuncts another planet, or makes an aspect to another planet right when it happens, it has the potential to prohibit the initial aspect. If it is an aspect and the original one was a conjunction, it won't cut it off. If it is a conjunction and the original aspect would have been an aspect, it will cut it off.
Yeah.
Let me see if using a chart, we can kind of give an example. Okay, let's pretend the Mercury and the Sun are at 29 and 30. Or wait, or rather, let's pretend, okay, let's see, is there anything? Oh, 29 and 30. Okay, perfect. Let's pretend Jupiter is here at 0 Sag. The Sun is here at 30 Scorpio, and Mercury is here at 28 Virgo. So Mercury thinks he's about to make his square to the Sun. But before that can happen, the Sun moves and makes this prohibiting conjunction to Jupiter. That prohibits this Mercury. Even if Mercury is about, because he's so fast, even once Mercury gets here, it won't perfect, because a conjunction can prohibit an aspect. However, okay, if all three of them are here, Mercury, Mars, Wait, Mercury, Sun, and Jupiter is here at 0. Sun is at 20, as at 30. Mercury is at 29. Sun comes over and conjuncts, but then so does Mercury come and after the Sun is finished with Jupiter, then Mercury makes his application to Jupiter. That would be considered a perfection. That would not be prohibited. So that's the difference. If Mercury tries to perfect to the Sun by the sextile, it won't happen because the conjunction has prohibited it. If Mercury also does it by conjunction, then bam, it can perfect.
Got it. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So, and Louise will come. Well, you know me, always be going backwards and looking at things again. But that's what number. So number 31 really did a little bit of a number on me. 32. Look to see if a malefic planet were the significator of some matter, what kind of condition it had. Right. So is it safe or is it impeded? Because if it were good, it will be good concerning the matter. If, however, it were bad, it will be bad concerning the matter. Sarsenator said something just like this in the Pentadecta. A malefic planet, when it is oriental, right? So that's when it's east of the sun, in its domicile or exaltation, and is not joined to a malefic who impedes him, is better and more dignified than a retrograde and impeded benefic. Remember my example about the Jupiter who's in Capricorn and combust in retrograde? So what he's saying is a Saturn in Aquarius in the first house is much better than a Jupiter in Gemini retrograde. Okay. 33. See whether some malefic is the significator of some matter and is joined to another malefic who impedes him. So now there was no malefic that impeded him in the last one. Or the Lord of the Ascendant, or the moon were joined to him by an evil aspect. This is different. Namely by a square or opposition. For the malefic perfects the purpose, but does not make it arrive to a good end. Rather, it will destroy it after it seemed to be arranged and is believed to be perfected. Let's look at that again. So if a malefic is the significator, so let's say we're talking about birth. So we're talking about fertility. Can I get pregnant? And the significator is the ruler of the fifth, and it's Saturn. And not only is it Saturn, but Mars is squaring. Okay? Or not only is it Saturn, the ruler of the ascendant is squaring. Or not only is it Saturn, but the moon is squaring. For the malefic perfects the purpose, but does not make it arrive to a good end. Rather, it will destroy it after it seemed to be arranged and is believed to be perfected. Now, this makes me think about the chart. This one. Oh, no, different one, sorry. Oh, I got rid of it. Okay, never mind. But it makes me think about that chart we were looking at where the woman got the job. If you remember, it was Saturn opposing the moon and the moon going to the square of Mars. And the whole thing that I was saying to Kid Cubby was, does this mean that she's going to hate the job? That was my thinking. Does this mean she's going to hate the fucking job? Is she going to wish that she hadn't taken it? And this is even before I was looking at that consideration. But I was thinking of the moon as being besieged. Right? And so, but I was also thinking of the moon as, but also seeing that seeing that it did actually come to be, right? So the thing actually did happen. So that was something, but at the same time, would that, I'm looking here, here it is. Would that, okay. So when I was looking at it this way, I was thinking, yeah, well, she gets the job, she's going to hate it. Kid Cubby didn't think it had anything to do with how the job would be. But look, but this is exactly what the consideration is just saying. It says, now that I've got it, I'm going to go back to the consideration. Some malefic is the significator of some matter. A malefic is a significator of both matters, of both the person and the matter, and is joined to another malefic who impedes him. Okay, or the Lord of the Ascendant or the moon were joined to him by an evil aspect, namely by a square or opposition. For the malefic perfects the purpose, but does not make it arrive to a good end. Rather, it will destroy it after it seemed, where am I? After it seemed to be arranged and is believed to be perfected. Based on that, looking at this chart, now do you understand why I was like, she didn't get the job? And if she got the job, it's garbage. You know, it's not, I don't, yeah, but then I thought, oh, well, the moon isn't the significator for the person. This is. The Mars is a significator, and he and the significator for the job are, you know, they're separating, but they're both dignified, meaning that they're not working as at their most malefic. And then we just looked at the other things that we saw. But now with this consideration, we did find out that she got the job, but it was a delay that created problems. As a matter of fact, let me read what she said. Hi guys, I cast a chart above asking, will I get the job, and tried to interpret it. I figured the answer would be yes, but her reason for it wasn't all that good. Let's see. It turns out I got the job, and it was actually a really delayed response after business hours. But then I am still invested in this and wondering, can the Hori give me insight about more than what I asked? For example, I want to know if the job will be good or not. Can I use this same chart? Or is it better to simply cast another chart? So with that in mind, what do you think? First of all, do you think that this chart, which asked whether she was going to get the job or not, can answer whether the job is good for her?
Yeah, I think it can.
Okay, what do you think it tells her?
Well, if we are talking about the job, then that's definitely the 10th house. But if we are talking about enjoying the job, then I think we can not only we can look at the 5th house is not that kind of enjoyment, but I think we can look at the 6th house because that's the routine of the job.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, not traditionally, it's not. You can look, I mean,
Okay.
Traditionally it wouldn't be, you wouldn't look at it at all, right? I mean, traditionally you wouldn't look
Right.
at the
Yeah.
routine of the job at all. Or you could
So
look
then
from
we
the,
look at the
I mean,
5th.
if you looked at the 6th from the 10th, maybe, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't use that. But
So
so that's the thing. Ultimately, it says the job is good. It does not say whether the job is good for her,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
The job is objectively good. It's objectively a good job. Nor is necessarily she good for the job, but she is good, right? If the Mars were in Libra, she'd be very good for the job too. Even though it might not, her position might be weak, but she would be good for the job, is how I'm interpreting it. You see what I mean? Because it would be in Libra. Or if it, I mean, and if it were in Aries, then she would not be good for the job, even though
Right.
she would have a very strong position. See the difference?
Yeah.
So in this particular case, it's neutral. It's like, yeah, she's in a good position to get the job. The job is a good job to get.
But would she like the job?
I think maybe See,
Yeah.
that's where I thought this stuff was the answer.
Hmm.
The moon is besieged by by the rays. He made a very good point about besiegement by rays being weaker than besiegement by body, and that fits with what we were just looking at with that consideration number 31, where they made the distinction between how potent a conjunction is versus how potent an aspect is.
Hmm.
I thought no. And I thought no, because if I was using moon for the co-ruler for the person, which which I decided was not the right thing, then I saw that the moon was applying to Mars and that the Mars was in the sign of her fall.
Yeah.
But that doesn't imply the job at all. That doesn't imply anything about the job, but it does imply moving towards something unpleasant.
Hmm.
But it's also moving towards her. So we've got the moon applying to the ruler of the ascendant, so which means yes, usually. See what I mean? So this was an interesting chart. So I think maybe not. Maybe this doesn't tell us. Oh, wait a second. She might. Right? The planet in the house describes the house.
Yeah.
Maybe this means there's just a lot of women that work there. But it could also mean that it's Venus in Capricorn. So it could be, she works with a lot of women, a lot of very serious women. But Venus is pleasure. So it could be, and also remember you were already talking about the Venus going to the Mars. So maybe yes, this could be. Based on that, we could use the Venus to describe the job and describe the conditions. Yeah, I think we could. Okay, we'll see. Well, it'd be interesting to, the problem is with Reddit, people don't really follow up that much
Yeah, she should. We have really
unless they
spent
were
time on this chart.
unless they were really right. Unless like when I
Yeah.
first started and I did for somebody, it happened exactly as I said, and they got right back to me privately. But horary, there should be a thing where people update. So let's see. So 33rd consideration is that you see whether some malefic is the significator of some matter and is joined to another malefic. Oh, we've just looked at that. Let's see if there's anything that we missed around it. Okay. Namely by square opposition. For the malefic perfects the purpose, right? We already looked at that. But look at this. But if the malefic who impeded were lighter, so that it sought the conjunction of the significator, it will impede less than if the significator were seeking the conjunction of the malefic who impedes. Okay, so basically what he's saying, if the malefic is applying to the planet, to the significator, and it's lighter, right? It has to be lighter in order to apply, then it will impede less. If the significator is applying to the malefic, it will impede more because the significator will be the lighter planet. So basically it's saying the lighter planet will impede less unless it's applying to a malefic, in which case the lighter planet will impede more, or the malefic will impede more. So if it's a malefic planet and it's lighter, so let's say the significator is Jupiter. We're asking, can I get pregnant? Jupiter is the ruler of the fifth. Mars is squaring. Mars is lighter than Jupiter, so it will impede less than if Jupiter were applying to the square of Saturn. Okay? So that it will be worse if the significator pushes than if it itself is pushed. Got it? Right? Because the significator pushes when it's Jupiter. Jupiter would be the significator, so Jupiter to Saturn would be Jupiter pushing. Mars to Jupiter would be Mars pushing. So it will be worse if the significator pushes. Remember, all planets push management than if it itself is pushed. So here, this goes back to that fucking language around Because what I wonder is, if a planet is pushed, does it commit its disposition to the pusher? We're back at where we started. 34th consideration is that you look to see in questions or in nativities or in any other matters about which you have to judge whether the significator of the business being handled is a malefic or is the Lord of the ascendant and is himself in the ascendant, direct and of good condition. So to judge whether the significator of the business being handled is a malefic and is the Lord of the ascendant and is himself in the ascendant. So the business being handled. So the business being handled, I guess whatever you're asking the question about. And if I'm looking, see, because remember, a nativity is just a horary chart that's asking what will happen in this life. Right? So that means every aspect of the natal chart can be addressed like a horary. Fertility is in the chart, job successes in the chart, financial successes in the chart, etc. Right? So that's basically that's how I'm interpreting this. The business at hand, business being handled. Right? So if even a natal chart, if I'm wondering about, if I come to you with my natal chart and I want to know if I can get pregnant, and Mars is the ruler of the fifth and it's in the ascendant. So that's what this person is saying. That's what he's saying. Direct, Mars is direct and of good condition. So let's say, well, it can't be Mars, can it? If it's, let's say it's Aries rising. No. It's Leo rising and Jupiter is the ruler of the fifth and Jupiter is in Leo in the ascendant. Okay, he's direct. Where are we? Lord of the Ascendant is himself in the ascendant, direct and of good condition. Middling, let's say it's nighttime, which would give Jupiter triplicity. And let's say Venus is sextiling. So he's in good condition. Okay, so that means then, if it were so, it perfects the matter and makes it arrive to a good end. So basically what he's saying is if you see, oh, he said a malefic though, didn't he? And I put Jupiter there. So it would really need to be Libra rising with Saturn in the ascendant. That's an even better one. Libra is rising. Saturn is the ruler of the fifth. He's in the ascendant. He's in exaltation. He's direct. That says it should happen. So because if it were so, it perfects the matter and makes it arrive to a good end. And even if it is not the significator, nor is it the Lord of the ascendant, and it is, oh, it needed to be the Lord of the ascendant. Oh, shit. So wait a minute. Significator of the business being handled usually means what you're asking about. But how can the significator of the business being handled also be the Lord of the ascendant? Would it have to be the kind of situation where Jupiter rules the first and the fourth and you're asking about your father?
Yeah, I think it's like that situation. Or if like Jupiter is the Lord of the 10th and also the Lord of the first, and you're asking about your career.
But Jupiter's not a malefic. He's saying if a malefic, the business being handled is a malefic and the Lord of the ascendant and in the ascendant. This might be bullshit. This one might be bullshit.
I mean, I think it can still work because let's say if you have an Aries ascendant and you have a Scorpio on the 10th house and you're asking about an inheritance that might come to you.
Okay, and you mean the 8th house? Yes, okay. Yeah. Okay, as ruler of the 8th. So then, okay, all right. Okay, that's a great example. Thank you very much. Fantastic. That's a fantastic example. Maybe the same thing if you're asking about money and it's Capricorn rising and Saturn is in Capricorn.
Yeah, and Aquarius, yeah, exactly.
Okay, okay. So it can't happen a lot, but it can happen. Yeah. So if it is, so wait, and so then he says, and even if it is not the significator, nor is it the Lord of the ascendant, and it is in the ascendant, and the ascendant were its exaltation. It will put down all its malice and will be held back from an evil impediment. So it doesn't need to be the significator of the thing, nor does it need to be the Lord of the ascendant. If it's in the ascendant and it's in its exaltation, it will put down all its malice and will be held back from an evil impediment. Now, so in other words, that does mean I can use the Libra rising example.
Yeah.
So it looks like what you said, Aries rising with Mars in the ascendant asking about an inheritance works.
Yeah.
Capricorn rising with Saturn in the ascendant asking about money works. Then when we move on, Libra rising with Saturn in the ascendant in Libra works.
It does. Yeah.
It will put down all its malice and will be held back from an evil impediment. Impeded, it increases its malice and its harmfulness, and its contrariety is multiplied, and it will try in every way to destroy the business. So basically, okay, the reason he's saying this is because a planet that's in the first house is advanced the most. Right? That's the strongest state of advancement. The first and the 10th house are the two strongest houses. They advance planets the most. So that means any planet in the first house, if it's in good condition, it's going to work like hell for you. If it's in bad condition, it's going to work like hell against you. So if Saturn were, let's say it's Libra, let's say it's Aries rising and Saturn is there. And you know what? We've seen this. We see chart after chart after chart on Reddit with people talking about how miserable they are with Saturn in Aries in the first house. When I first started on Reddit, every other chart I saw was a Saturn in the first house, and every other chart than that was a Saturn in Aries in the first chart. Right? So that would be an example of where the planet goes out of its way to fuck things up for you. And it will try in every way to destroy the business. Right? So if it's a natal chart, the thing it's destroying is your peace of mind, right? Because the first house is the head.
Yeah.
Right? So which means it can destroy everything. Because if your head's not together, you can't do anything. 35th. Look to see whether a malefic planet is in signs similar to it, because then it reduces its malice. So what would be a sign similar to Mars? Not a sign that he rules, but a sign that's similar to his nature. No one? Leo.
Oh, yeah.
Leo is hot and dry, so is Mars. So let's do the same thing with Saturn. What is a sign that's similar to Saturn's nature?
Saturn is cold and dry. So cold and dry would be
Capricorn, Virgo, Taurus.
Yeah.
So any earth sign, those are the cold, dry signs. So basically what it's saying is when you find a planet, so for instance, Jupiter in Gemini, right? Jupiter is a sanguine planet and Gemini is a sanguine sign, right? Or Venus in Gemini should be relatively good for Venus, although it's not good for love, but it's good for other aspects of Venus, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, but it's asking about a malefic planet. So that makes more sense. It's asking about a malefic planet that's in signs similar to it, because then it reduces the malice of the malefic planet. And it is just like one who has what he wants, because then he is found to be of goodwill and more upright and more merciful and less malicious. So Mars in Leo, Jupiter in Virgo, or Taurus, Mars and Leo, Jupiter and or Sagittarius, Jupiter and Virgo or Taurus, they'll act a little better. Remember we saw that chart where the person asked, can somebody talk to me about my my impeded, he called it his impeded, his impeded chart ruler. And it was Mars and Leo in the 10th, and it was squaring Jupiter and Scorpio in the first house, and it was not impeded at all. And here we see indeed, and one of the things I said is Mars is hot and dry, and he's in a hot and dry sign. So this is actually not a bad thing for Mars. And so sure enough, that's what they're saying too. So a malefic planet in signs similar to it, then it reduces its malice, and it is just like one who has what he wants, blah, 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 like when Saturn is in Capricorn or Aquarius or Libra. Now, he's using Aquarius, they're using the signs that they rule, or in a cold sign, bam. And especially if he had some dignity there. And like when Mars is in Aries or Scorpio or in Capricorn or in a hot sign, bam. And especially if he had some dignity there. Now, he only has dignity in Aries, right? So, but because then he perfects it. If indeed Saturn were in a hot sign outside of his dignities, or Mars were in a cold sign outside of his dignities, it will be bad, nor is the purpose perfected. Just like a mixture of water with oil is not easily accomplished, nor do they embrace each other. Notice that isn't it? Notice that he didn't say hot and dry or cold and dry. He said cold or hot, meaning, because I think about my Saturn is in Pisces, which is cold. It's cold and wet, but it's cold. And I think about my Mars, which is in Aquarius, which is also wet. So that would be more of a planet, of a sign that's not really useful to Mars. It's somewhat cool. It's, it's temperate and it's temperate and wet. But Saturn is in a sign that's cold and wet. So even though he doesn't love the wet, he can really hang with the cold. And so that might be just something to kind of look at in your own charts, right? For a thing, right? Because this is kind of an interesting little tidbit. It might mean something, it might not. But he is saying, because remember, everything is about consideration for. How do things get perfected or not? Right? So what he's saying is, if the significator, if you're asking about fertility, and Saturn is the ruler of the 5th, and he is in Taurus, let's say that. He's in Taurus. That's not bad. And we already know that Taurus is a sign that promises at least one child. So, or one child, it's a sign of few children. So we could pretty much say, hey, I think this Saturn, based on this consideration, we can say, I guess this Saturn can perfect that, right? Because it's in a sign that's similar to his nature, totally similar to his nature, not just cold, but completely similar to his nature. He's not dignified in it, but he won't act as bad because it's allowing him to be him. And so, but if we were to see Saturn in Aries, obviously, which is this fall, but even in Sagittarius, same thing. We're asking about fertility. We want to know, and Saturn is the ruler of the 5th, but now he's in Sag instead. So that says something different. That says, hey, you know what? The Saturn might not be able to hack it, because he's in a sign outside of his own. It's a dry sign, but it's not a hot one, but it's not a cold one. So what if he's in, what's a hot and wet sign? Is there a hot and wet? Wait, we have hot and dry, cold and dry, temperate and wet. So we've got, Libra. See, Libra is temperate and wet. See, there is no hot and wet. There's only temperate and wet. I'm like, what about hot and wet? So ultimately, I guess we would have to go with hot. And that might be why. This might be why. That they didn't go with, they didn't go with cold, dry, hot, like, if Saturn is in a hot and wet sign, there is no such thing as a hot and wet sign. there are hot signs. There are cold and dry signs, but there are not hot and wet signs. So ultimately, so that's kind of the point that they're making. So the point I'm making is that if indeed, because remember, it's talking about malefic. If the malefic is the ruler of the fifth house and it's Saturn, and he were in Taurus, maybe that wouldn't be so bad because it's a cold and dry sign. And so is he. But if it's in Sagittarius or Leo, well, certainly Leo's the detriment, but Sagittarius, maybe then he might not be so conducive because it's in a hot sign and he doesn't like to be hot. So something to think about there. Outside of his dignities, it will be bad, nor is the purpose perfected. So if he's in a hot sign outside of his dignities, so Sagittarius is outside of his dignities, and Mars in a cold sign outside of his dignities. So if Mars were in Virgo, okay, then, or if Mars were in Cancer, well, obviously Cancer. Pisces, well, here's the thing, Mars likes Pisces because Mars is the nighttime triplicity ruler for water. So it isn't really cold. It isn't really the water signs, in my opinion. It might just be the earth signs that are not so good for Mars, except for Capricorn, right? So once again, same thing. If the ruler of the fifth is Mars and he's in Virgo, well, Virgo's a sterile sign. If he's in Taurus, that's his detriment. If he's in Capricorn, that's his exaltation. If he's in any of the water signs and he's the ruler of the fifth, he's in fertile signs. And he rules Scorpio. And he has, oh, I want to show you something. Matter of fact, we'll stop here with this consideration. And then I want to show you somebody's chart. We were going to look at Kathy Battle, but we're going to look at Billie Holiday for a second because I want to show you something. Because this whole thing about Mars and cold and wet just brought me into thinking about something. Let me get my dignities chart. Hold on one second. What I want to bring your attention to is the thing that I've often talked about when we talk about essential dignities is that the thing that we talk about is that it's the degree of the sign that really matters, that really kind of shows you the extent to which how much the person or the planet is dignified. I want to bring your attention to this Mars. So matter of fact, all three of these planets, in this particular chart, it's a nighttime chart. This is Billie Holiday. All three of these planets in Pisces are in their own term, which means that Venus gets 4 points here. Let's look at that. She's in the 6th degree, which means that for Pisces, Venus gets 4 points for exaltation. It's nighttime, so she doesn't get the 3 points for the triplicity, but then she also gets 6 points, 2 points for term. So she gets 6 points, which means that she's actually the almutin of that term of Pisces. So even though Jupiter is the domicile ruler of Pisces, she's the almutin of that term. So between 0 and 12, rather 0 and 10, she is the almutin. Why do I say 0 and 10? Because after 10, Jupiter becomes the face ruler and he gets 6 points for for domicile and face. So they will be, so she will have 4 points and Jupiter would have 6. Going back to the chart, the Jupiter is at 14 or in the 15th degree, which is his term. Jupiter gets 5 points for domicile and then gets 2 points for term and then gets another one for face. So gets 8 points. So he is definitely the almutin for this term. So from 12 degrees until 16 degrees, Jupiter is the almutin of Pisces. Okay, this is what's going to blow your mind. Mars is in his term. He's in the 23rd degree of Pisces. Mars is the nighttime triplicity ruler, giving him 3 points. Mars is in his own term, giving him 2 points. Mars is in his face, giving him 1 point. He is the exaltation ruler. He is the almutin of 19 to 28 Pisces. So Jupiter is the domicile ruler of the entire sign. But between 0 and 10, Venus is the almutin. Between 12 and 16, Jupiter is the almutin. And between 19, actually no, between 20 and 30, wait, 20 and 28, Mars is the almutin. So my point, the reason I brought that up is we were looking at cold, right? If Mars is in a cold sign outside of his dignities, if it's nighttime and Mars is in a cold, wet sign, he's only outside of his dignity in one sign, which is Cancer, right? Which means that the cold and wet isn't really a problem for Mars. Now, one of the things that they talked about with Mars was that they put Mars, they gave Mars these dignities in water and in earth because the cool would cool down his heat. So they wanted to cool Mars down. They didn't necessarily want to heat Saturn up. Notice that Saturn isn't exalted in any signs that are hot, or isn't domicile in any signs that are hot. But Mars is in domicile and exaltation in signs that are cold. He owns Aries, that's his joy. His feminine sign is Scorpio, which is cold and wet. His exaltation is Capricorn, which is cold and dry. Unlike Saturn, whose feminine domicile is cold and dry, whose masculine domicile is temperate and wet. So there's the way in which we kind of temper his dryness and cold with Libra and Aries. I mean, Libra and Aquarius, rather. Let's find that chart that, let's see, this one. This is the chart that Anne Louise showed us. I'm going to do very little. I'm going to let you all do it. So tell me something about this. So first of all, what's advancing? What's advanced? What's in a state of advancement?
I think it's only Sun and Mars.
Yeah, I would say the Sun. Yeah.
Sun, Mars, Moon, Saturn.
Oh yeah, of course.
Sun, Mars, Moon, Saturn. Now, what are the houses that are ruled by Sun, Mars, Moon, and Saturn?
Sun rules the 6th. Moon
Okay.
rules the
5th and 4th.
It's intercepted. Yeah. Saturn rules the 10th and the, oh, it's
11th.
intercepted, and 12th. And then
So 10, 11, 12 is Saturn.
and Mars is the ascendant ruler.
Okay, Mars is the ascendant ruler. Okay, thank you. Okay, so then, and Mars is exalted in this chart.
Yeah.
Mars rules the 1st. Oh, I see. Scorpio is intercepted.
Intercepted,
So,
yeah.
okay, so also, look at how we have the moon recently separating from Mars, like within a few minutes.
Yes.
Mm.
Okay, so and also the moon is in the sign of Mars. So what would this tell us about this person? What would that tell us? What would the moon Mars square say about this person?
I mean, if we are taking moon as a significator of the mother, then maybe some troubles with the mother.
It is night, it is daytime, so it is daytime, so we would use Venus.
But it's the ruler of the fourth house.
But the fourth house is
Sorry.
the fourth house is the father.
Yeah, but you said that if the
If
fourth
it's
is
in
ruled by
there,
moon.
if it's
Oh,
in
okay,
there,
Okay,
if
okay,
Moon or Venus are in there,
okay,
they need to be in there. They need to be there for it to be matriarchal,
okay.
from what I've seen. Because you know what, and I got a good example of this. Davik is Aries rising, almost this exact degree. And he's got Cancer on the midheaven. And I asked him about his relationship with his father, who he lives with. And he said, well, it kind of waxes and wanes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the moon and Venus need to be in there,
Okay,
in my opinion. What this implies to me, one of the things I've been looking at or thinking about a lot
Can I
lately.
say something?
Yes, of course, Anne Louise.
Well, both his parents, they had some kind of handicap.
They have
So
some kind of
some disability, some kind of disability.
Oh, they both are disabled. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, they're both disabled. Now that's interesting, especially considered that the ruler of the fourth is squared to an exalted planet. But who? Okay, now but look at okay. So let's look at that. That's very okay. So then what we would need to look at? Oh, look at that. The Mars is on the ooh, isn't that interesting? The Mars is on the cusp of the eighth from the eighth from the fourth. So that gives us some problem, because that shouldn't be a problem. That would be the last thing I would be thinking, was that the moon Mars represented disabled parents. The first thing I was going to say before you came in was that the thing I've been looking at lately is the moon shows you who she's working for, who she's primarily working for, based on the sign she's in. And, which is why you can tell, which is why with some of these charts where there have been a lot of physical disabilities, we've seen the moon in the sign of the ruler of the sixth. And in this particular case, the moon, right, which we are considering like the co-ruler for everything, the moon is the ruler of everything in this chart on a certain level, and it's on the ascendant, representing the mind and the head. So, and remember the part of the mind that the moon is, which is the desire. So it's the thing we desire, it's our reflex, it's what we reach for. So it's especially what we reach for when we're stressed. And so we can see that this person has dealt with a lot of stress, and more than likely from their parents. It looks like there's been a very stressful situation with their parents, and that this person might be rash, might act before thinking. Why do I say
exactly?
Why do I say that? Because Mars is action. Mars, the ruler of action, is exalted. Aries, which is the active aspect of Mars, is on the ascendant, and the moon is there too. So the moon is always reacting, acting and reacting. This person is a person who's always reacting and acting in some way as a result of that reaction. So this would be a person that might be a little extra. You would, let's say the person walks in and you say, surprise, it's a surprise party, and they don't know. This would be the kind of person that would drop everything or break something, would accidentally break something in response, or would run out of the room and then run back in, or, this person acts and then thinks.
Exactly, yeah.
And that's a problem. That's a problem because that's this person's main way of doing things. Remember, we were just talking about if something's in the first house, how it's going to either do everything it can to help or it's going to do everything it can to fuck you over. And especially if the planet is impeded. We could now, of course, Mars in Capricorn is not really at his most malefic, but he is at his most overdrive. So I would say this person also is in overdrive. Might go faster than everybody else. Might always want to go faster.
Yeah. Do you know the show from a few years back called Californication?
No.
Okay. No.
Oh, Californication. Oh, yes, I do. Yes. Of course, I know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If David Duchovny, Hank Moody, he has a bit of highlights. It's to match the Scandinavian look. He would be he is that person.
Got
faster than everybody else. Needs to try everything from drugs to fast cars and alcohol and women. And...
Yeah. So this is someone who thinks they're a pioneer, but they're really. But the problem is, see, this person can't really relax either, and that might be that she had mentioned already that that there was a drug addiction problem, so I knew that. But notice that Venus Jupiter, right? We've already talked about Venus Jupiter and too much of a good thing. I think this person is kind of hedonistic.
Extremely, but considers himself a Christian. Yeah.
Oh, he considers himself Christian, but he's very hedonistic. Yeah, this person is hedonistic. And but look at this. Okay, so you said the person considers himself a Christian. So notice that Jupiter is the ruler of the ninth, and Venus is in this cluster with Jupiter, right? So we could remember when we talked about an assembly being within 15 degrees. So we can say that this Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter are all in assembly. And so that means that the Venus Mercury would affect the Jupiter. If you remember when we were talking about religion, one of the things they said about Venus as the ruler of religion is that they're not that religious. They're faux religious. What they really like is pleasure, but they'll pretend to be religious. And notice that the Jupiter is in Libra, it's in Venus's sign, and Venus is the ruler of it. And so Venus is there too. So Venus tends to be the lip service towards religion, or they really believe in it, but they can't uphold it because they're just too busy succumbing to temptation, right? Because Venus can't resist temptation. Venus does not resist temptation. She succumbs to it. And so this chart is super hedonistic, but of course, with the Jupiter ruling the ninth, it wants to believe that it is. It wants to believe that it believes, right? And so does the Venus. So it's a little bit of pipe dreaming, wants to believe. And notice also, remember that the Jupiter would be the natural 12th house ruler in this chart. I think the Venus Jupiter, the Venus Moon, the Venus Mercury Jupiter here, does this person play music or act or dance or sing or anything? Or DJ?
He was in his younger years. He was very active. He worked as a model and a bartender.
Okay. Model. That makes more sense because so it's not the Venus talent. He didn't show the Venus Mercury talent. He showed the Venus beauty on display. Venus beauty on display thing. Instead. Now that's it. Where's the part of fortune? Let's see. 1, 2, 22. So forward, let's see, what is it? Would be forward 180, back 9. Forward 180, and look, back 9, putting us at 12, back 9, 14 degrees of Libra, right in between the Venus and the Mercury. He should have gone into acting. He should have, he probably wanted to go from modeling to acting, did he?
He went into funding his own marketing company, marketing agency.
Does he market does he mostly work with like beauty related products or women's?
More. He had for 25 years. He lived in Paris and worked as a model there and did a bit of snowboarding he was a snowboard instructor during the winter season in the Alps. And then then for 25 years he ran his own marketing company. But there was mainly, he had a bit of clothing brands that he advertised for. But he
There
was
we
a bit
go.
of pioneer. Yeah,
So
he was a bit of pioneer.
Okay, so he's
Yeah,
always been in fashion. He's always been in fashion, and see, that's Venus. That's Venus Mercury too. So that also works for Venus Mercury. So Venus Mercury is always things on display and usually displaying talent. So the most usual thing you see with Venus Mercury is music and dancing. Music and dance.
He started his own. He became a life coach and addiction counselor a year or two ago during the pandemic. Yeah.
So bringing balance to other people. So he probably found some. Is the guy a workaholic?
Also, yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He,
so that's
he was.
That's the moon
was
Mars.
the one. He always worked a lot, and as you can see with the moon and sun, almost they're not really opposite, but there's a bit. He earned a bit of money, but he also was quite good at spending them.
Is he estranged from his father? Do he and his father not get along?
When we lived together, yeah, they did. They was very sporadically, to say it in very nice terms.
Okay, so was he raised without his father at all?
No. The parents, they had a very traditional marriage.
But he should not have he should still have problems with the father. There should be major father.
He had.
Okay, yeah, there should be major father issues in this chart. Yeah. Often, now here, this Sun Saturn opposition can often represent an absent father. So it could also be the kind of thing where the father was there but absent. It often can mean there is no father in the person's life. It can mean that they have absented the father from their life. They don't want the father in their life. So usually the Sun Saturn opposition specifically, I tend to notice there is a real distance. Either they've never known them, or they don't want anything to do with them, or they can't get along at all, or whatever. But Sun Saturn opposition, almost always.
The Sun Moon in opposition, you said?
Yes.
Or
Sun Saturn.
Okay.
Sun Saturn.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. That's more, the line there.
Because they're both significators for father, right? So Sun is the daytime significator for father. Saturn is the nighttime significator. So Sun, Saturn. Okay. And see, we can also see the problem with the father with the square of the moon, right? Because the moon is the father. Moon rules the fourth, and the fourth house is squared Mars. So there's arguments and contentions, and probably, I'll bet you this, I bet you he's an overachiever because of the father. I bet the father made him feel like he wasn't doing enough, or wasn't practical enough, or would never make it, or something like that. And much of this stuff was to prove, much of what he has done has been to prove to his father that he can make it, that he's a real business person.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah. See if you can find out. See if you can find out for me if there's anything around that.
When he had his ups and downs with his father, and especially because the psychological problems that this person had, and his father also had his issues and issues with alcohol. They had some. They had
Oh.
some issues there.
So
Yeah,
similarities. So basically genetic similarities that basically he inherited some of his problems from his father. And you can, okay,
exactly.
so that makes sense too.
Yeah.
So you can kind of, so because think the fourth house is familial inheritances, not inheritances from the dead, but what we inherit from our family, traits, values, all of that. So the family culture, I often call it the family culture. So this family culture would be, this moon Mars would be a part of what he inherited from the father. So it would come from the father. That'd be part of his familial, his paternal inheritance. So whatever issues. So once again, these issues of moving too fast, acting before I think, going into things without thinking them fully through, all of that stuff would probably have also come from the father.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Well, if
Yeah.
that's what you're saying, from what you're saying, it sounds like they both, it sounds like they have a similar orientation that fucks them both up.
But the father was much more traditional than he is.
But you said the
He,
father had similar psychological problems.
yeah,
but
exactly.
but he might not have, being so traditional, like this is the chart of a hedonist. We haven't seen the chart
Yeah.
of the father, right? Which might have
No,
other
no,
issues
no.
that make him very conservative, right? So this is the chart of somebody who pretends to be conservative, but absolutely is not. Or
Yeah, exactly.
who might have conservative, or it's the kind of thing like this. You know how when you meet a person and they seem to have a point of view, but when you scratch at it, you realize they don't really
Yeah.
have one. This is that person.
But
Where they,
that's the acting. He
yes,
he could he could at a party, at a family function, he could talk for hours about his endeavors and his achievement and what's going on, and everybody would say, oh, you're such a funny and such a nice guy and you're good looking, and nobody would tell him that, but you could just he at his younger days he had really lots of friends and lots of acquaintances, and but yes, you should only scratch on the surface, then he was completely different. He didn't give a fuck about anything.
right. But put on that he did, right? So put on that he believed a certain thing, but you get, and see, this is part of the faith and belief part of the ninth house with Venus, with Jupiter in a Venus sign with Venus. Venus really only believes in what gives her pleasure. But if other things, like with this Mars and Capricorn, there will be, and especially with the Mars and Capricorn with the moon, there's going to be a traditional kind of upbringing, or a traditional kind of way of looking at life, even if you don't accept it. Right. So you said that both of his parents were really traditional, the father very conservative and traditional. So he would come from that kind of upbringing or way of looking at it, but he wouldn't follow through with it because of all of this stuff. So this stuff would be like, no, I got to be me. We got to do what it is we love. We got to have what we love. And of course, being physically attractive and being attracted to beauty, he would go for fashion and modeling and those kinds of things. It wasn't just about his own beauty. He was attracted to female beauty or male beauty or whatever kind of person he's in. But he was attracted to being
Yeah,
around beautiful people, being around beauty.
he definitely had his needs and wants.
You're being so discreet. It's so nice of you. You can't share a chart and be quite that damn discreet, okay?
Well, okay, he was married to a famous singer first
Okay.
in his early 20s. Yeah, when he came back from Paris, and they got a teenage kid today, but he's not allowed to see that kid because she thinks he will fuck him up.
It's because he's fucked up. So so the
Yeah.
famous person so we got the sun in the seventh. So that can be a famous spouse. And we also have the ruler of the seventh with Jupiter and Mercury. And so there it is. I asked if he were the singer, but it's the spouse.
Oh, why? But
right?
they haven't.
Music.
Oh,
Because the Venus Mercury is music, and it's the ruler of the seventh. Oh my
but they
God.
haven't been together for 18 years.
Oh, but that doesn't matter. It would still bring it in. It would still bring a spouse
It
who is
would?
musical.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, well, it did.
Because
Not would, it did.
okay.
Yeah, it brought a spouse
Okay.
that was musical. Once again, this person likes to be around the beautiful, the talented, the musical, this person likes to be around that. The sexual, the sexy. This person likes to be around that.
Yeah,
And
he
so,
needs sex all the time. Yeah.
right. And so, okay.
He needed.
Right? He's a little slut. And so as a result, it's the Venus as the ruler of the seventh, Venus Mercury representing music, the sun in the seventh, which is fame, and then the Jupiter, which can, create an expansive person, an expansive musical person. So that fits perfectly that he was married to a famous singer, he was married to a singer. And there it is. That's where. So once again, Venus, Mercury, music, almost always, or acting. It's always on display. It's always displaying some talent. And because Venus is art and Mercury is skill. So there's always some kind of, I mean, it's funny, I had a good friend in San Francisco who he had Venus Mercury in Cancer in the 10th house.
Yeah.
And it turned out that as a kid, he won bunches of competitions for piano. He didn't touch a piano. I never even knew he played piano until I did this chart for him. I knew him for a few years before I did the chart for him. I never knew he played piano. But he had won a bunch of things for piano. But when I met him, until he did it for as long as he could. When I met him, he was dancing naked at a porn shop, it was called the Nob Hill Theater. So porn theaters, there were porn theaters where you would have naked dancers that would come, or dancers that would do strip or whatever. He worked at the Nob Hill in San Francisco, and this is when it was still gay Mecca.
Oh, the quarter when I backpacked US, I stayed in San Francisco at a hostel, the Green Tortoise, and it was in that quarter where they had all the strip bars and sex clubs and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Green Tortoise. I remember. Okay. Yeah, I remember Green Tortoise very well. I said I remember Green Tortoise very, very well. The Green Tortoise Hostel, and they had a bus too. They did tours, and I did. Did you do one of their tours?
I did. I went for the big one, 10 weeks almost.
South America? Did you do the big South American one?
No. I didn't. I wanted to sign up for the Mexico one, but I was too sick at that point.
Yeah, they had that huge Mexico tour. That's right.
Yeah, but I did the overland. Down from.
Was this 90s? Was this the 90s?
No. I was too young at that time. It was it was 10 years ago. This summer, okay. 10 years ago, 2011.
Okay.
September.
Okay.
So yeah, I took some time off from my MBA and did that. I was away for 2 months.
Okay. I'm gonna stop